Om Sarashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshwara. Good. All right. Yes. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Nice to see you all this morning. Welcome back. And welcome also to our many students taking these classes online. We continue our study, the final part of chapter 18, absolutely the most wonderful part of the Bhagavad Gita. And we'll begin today's class. We didn't meet last week, of course, because of the anniversary, so we'll pick up the thread today with some recitation, beginning with verse 50. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma, siddhim prapto yatha brahma, tatapnoti na bodha me, tatapnoti na bodha me, samase naiva kaunteya, samase naiva kaunteya, nishtha jnanasya yapara, nishtas Jnanasya yapara. And this didn't go. No, there we go. Okay. Buddhya vishuddhaya yukto, buddhya vishuddhaya yukto, dhrityatmanam niyamya cha, dhrityatmanam niyamya cha, shabdadin vishayan styaktva, shabdadin vishayan styaktva, ragadvesha vyudasya cha, ragadvesha vyudasya cha, vivikta sevi lagvashi, vivikta sevi lagvashi, yatavakaya manasaha, yatavakaya manasaha, dhyana yoga paro nityam, dhyana yoga paro vairagyam samupashritaha, vairagyam samupashritaha, ahankaram balam darpam, ahankaram balam darpam, kamam krodham parigraham, kamam krodham parigraham, vimuchya nirmama shanto, vimuchya nirmama shanto, brahma bhuyaya kalpate, brahma bhuyaya kalpate, brahma bhuta prasannatma, brahma bhuta prasann. Na shochati na kankshati, na shochati na kankshati, sama sarveshu bhuteshu, sama sarveshu bhuteshu, madbhaktim labhate param, madbhaktim labhate param, bhaktya mam abhijanati, bhaktya mam abhijanati, yavan yaschasmi tattvataha, yavan yaschasmi tattvataha, tato mam tattvato jnatva, tato mam tattvato jnatva, vishate taranantaram, vishate taranantaram. Obviously some very important verses coming. We'll pick up the thread where we left off. In fact, this is a very nice place to begin with Sri Krishna himself introducing the next topic. So since he does it so nicely, I need not say anything. Let's see the verse. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma, siddhim prapto yatha brahma, tatapnoti bodha me, tatapnoti bodha me, samasenaiva kaunteya, samasenaiva kaunteya, nishtha jnanasya ya para, nishtha jnanasya Nibodha me. In the second line, Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, understand this, Nibodha, understand this me from me, understand what I'm about to tell you. About to tell you what? In the first line, yatha, the way in which siddhim praptaha, one who is prapta, one who has gained siddhi, perfection. One who has gained perfection. Here, sometimes siddhi means moksha. Here it can't mean moksha, because it says one who gains siddhi gains Brahman. So here siddhi means perfection, fine. Perfect preparation. As we've discussed here on some occasions, the importance of preparation for the spiritual path cannot be understated. You can't just plunge in and go for the highest teachings and expect to grasp them. And there are, by the way, there are some modern groups that take exactly that kind of approach. There is a modern tradition which has come down, and it's often called Neo-Advaita, and it's taught mostly by Western disciples of this Papaji, this Punjaji, who taught in North India many years ago. So his Western disciples in Europe and this country, you go to the class and they say, come on, wake up, you're already enlightened, you got it? That's it. Now, what's interesting is that what they're saying is in large measure true, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it happens to be the responsibility of the teacher to encourage the students to engage in adequate spiritual practices to be ready for that message. Wake up. Wake up is an important message. But, it's not like waking up out of sleep. Someone can just push your arm and you wake up out of sleep. To wake up out of the illusion of the world is something else entirely. For this kind of waking up, this kind of knowledge, just seeing if he uses the word. He doesn't use the word. As in Arsha Bodha, Bodha means knowledge. And it's interesting that Buddha can have two meanings, either one who has knowledge or one who has woken up. Has both meanings. Buddha, one who has woken up, or one who has knowledge. That double meaning is quite intentional. So here, the waking up is in terms of gaining this spiritual wisdom. In order to gain this spiritual wisdom, you need a tremendous amount of preparation first. That preparation here is referred to as siddhi. So siddhim praptaha, one who has gained this siddhi, this preparation. Yatha, the manner in which such a person Tata apnoti, in that manner, apnoti Brahma, gains Brahman, reaches Brahman, attains the highest goal of spiritual life, gains enlightenment, gains moksha. The manner in which one who is fully prepared gains Brahman, gains moksha, liberation, Nibbodha me. O Arjuna, listen, understand this from me. Understand this from me. In fact, he says to, he addresses Arjuna in the third line, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, please understand this from me, samasena, in brief. In brief, because we're in the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it's already been much more extensively taught in chapter 2 especially, but also other aspects in chapter 7, 9, scattered throughout this Bhagavad Gita are these teachings about how to reach the highest goal, how to reach Brahman. Just an interesting observation though. Suppose we were to take the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and put them on a scale, a balance beam scale. And you put the teachings of jnanam, the teachings of knowledge, that knowledge of Brahman. So you put Brahma jnanam, knowledge of Brahman, on one side of the scale. On the other side of the scale, you put karma yoga, meditation, and bhakti. Which will weigh more? Karma yoga, meditation, and bhakti. Absolutely. And understanding that karma yoga, meditation, and bhakti are all preliminary practices. You can see the emphasis of the entire Bhagavad Gita on preparation. And fortunately, Sri Krishna here is giving us an introduction. The next 3 verses are going to be on preparation. So here, Sri Krishna introduces the preparation required. He says, the manner in which a fully prepared person gains enlightenment, nishtha jnanasya yapara, the enlightenment yapara nishtha, that which is the highest state, jnanasya, of knowledge. Reaching Brahman, I'm paraphrasing part of the verse to make a point. Reaching Brahman, according to Sri Krishna, is the highest kind of knowledge. I'll say that again, and this is actually I'm not paraphrasing, this is an exact translation of a portion of the verse. Reaching Brahman is the highest knowledge. And the reason I'm stressing this is many people have a mistaken notion that reaching Brahman is some kind of spiritual experience. And that's not what Sri Krishna says at all. And he doesn't say it's some kind of experience because, as we've discussed before, experiences come and go. But he uses the term nishtha here, that which is firmly established. Experiences come and go, but knowledge can be assimilated and firmly established. So it's easy to overlook some of these things. In fact, it's easy to read and misunderstand the entire Bhagavad Gita. I'm not surprised when somebody comes and says, Swamiji, I've read the entire Bhagavad Gita, and I understand. It usually sounds like this. Sorry for being a little sarcastic. Swamiji, I understand everything. Right. Swamiji, I understand everything, but how to experience it? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten that kind of question. I understand everything, but how to experience it? This question indicates a kind of misunderstanding that is so deeply woven into conventional thought, and that is you need some kind of special, unique experience to become enlightened, as we just said. When the experience is over, will you say, yeah, I was enlightened for about 20 seconds? The duration of that experience. You get the point. Knowledge can be nishtha, can be firm, can be well assimilated. And just to underline the importance of this teaching, remember a very fundamental teaching of Vedanta. We haven't talked about it for a long time. Let's just recall it because it's central here. And that is the rishis, the sages of ancient India, never ever said, you will become Satchidananda Atma. And the example I've given again and again is that their Mahavakya, Tattvam Asi, and the other Mahavakyas as well, are all in the present tense. The rishis never said, you will become that. Or to put it in more simple terms, it's not that your true nature will become divine. Your true nature is already divine. You get that. So if your true nature is already divine, what's the point of a transformative experience? You already are that which you want to be. One of my guru's statements. You already are that which you want to be. So what is the problem? The problem is the so-called veil of ignorance preventing you from recognizing your true nature. And he also used the term self-non-recognition. If self-non-recognition is the problem, you already recognize, you look in the mirror, you recognize your body and mind. You have yet to recognize your true nature. To recognize your true nature, you don't need the mirror in your bathroom. To use my guru's words, to recognize your true nature, you need to see yourself in the mirror of the teachings of Vedanta. Just as the mirror in your bathroom reveals your physical form, these teachings can make you see the truth of yourself. That self-recognition, the fancy word, Atma Sakshatkara, self-recognition is the key here. And recognition is knowledge, right? Experiences come and go. And sadly, when the experience is gone, you may be the same as you were before the experience. We have this assumption that an experience will come and radically transform us. You've had a lot of experiences in life. Have you been radically transformed by all those experiences? They've all left their mark. Every experience leaves its mark. But generally, most experiences don't lead to a radical transformation. After the experience is over, we're more or less the same as we were prior to the experience. So, enough said here. The goal is not experience. The goal is self-recognition. Sri Krishna calls that jnanam. Jnanasya paranishta. This complete, firm establishment, being firmly established in jnanam, he says. That is the goal. And this verse then introduces the next 3 verses, which talk about how can you get prepared to gain that knowledge. To gain knowledge requires preparation. To gain any knowledge requires preparation. Remember in college days when you had prerequisites for certain classes? Here we're going to see the prerequisites for enlightenment in the next 3 verses. Where are we? Here. Buddhya vishuddhaya yukto buddhya vishuddhaya yukto dhrityatmanam niyamya cha dhrityatmanam niyamya cha shabdadin vishayans tyaktva shabdadin vishayans tyaktva ragadveshav yudasya cha ragadveshav yudasya cha. These are great verses. So, what does it take to gain to be fully prepared for this spiritual wisdom to sink in? And he says, you should be yuktaha, end of the first line. You should be endowed with buddhya, with a buddhi, with a mind, with an intellect. What kind of mind or intellect? Vishuddhaya. Vishuddhi means completely pure. You should be endowed with a completely pure mind. I smile because everyone uses that term. We need purity of mind. No one really thinks about what does it mean to have a pure mind. When I was teaching children, I asked them, what does it take to get a pure mind? And they didn't know what I was talking about. I said, should you pour soap in your ear and get it inside so that you can have a pure mind? They all laugh, but you get the point. We use these expressions without thinking about them, and purity of mind is a good example. So purity, obviously, is the absence of impurity, right? Pure water doesn't have anything added to it. It's what's missing that makes the water pure. So purity refers to an absence. A pure mind, then, refers to the absence of something in your mind. Absence of what? There's a long list. But we can start with anger, hate, jealousy, greed, acquisitiveness. The list goes on and on and on. Let's focus on several, though. I started with anger, jealousy. Hurt is very much under-recognized as an obstacle to spiritual growth. I'm making, this is actually a very important point. Many people come to a spiritual path assuming that their spiritual practice will automatically resolve all the emotional problems in your life. It doesn't work that way. For a spiritual problem, we have a spiritual solution. Great. For an emotional problem, Bhagavad Gita is not the solution. Bhagavad Gita is not the solution for emotional problems. What is the solution? Depends on the problem. But sometimes you need to work it out yourself. Sometimes you need to work things out with another people. Sometimes you may even need the help of a third person or a therapist. Whatever it takes, these emotional problems need to be addressed. And to be very specific, if there is an event in your past, and every time you remember that event, you still twinge with guilt and hurt and frustration and anger, if those feelings still arise decades after that terrible incident happened, that indicates that you have emotional work to do, so to speak. You have unaddressed emotional issues. In American English, they call it baggage, emotional baggage. You have to get rid of that baggage. Your mind has to be relatively free of anger, hurt, jealousy, frustration, resentment, another big one. And to do that requires a process of emotional growth. That's not our subject matter here. I mean, we encourage, these teachings encourage emotional growth, but these teachings are not sufficient for emotional growth. So, if you find yourself lacking the emotional growth to make your mind pure, then you should find whatever it takes for you to gain that emotional growth, to come out of those emotional problems. Crucial. In fact, Sri Krishna begins with that for a reason. So step one, if you want to put this in like a list, a to-do list, if the to-do list to get prepared for enlightenment, if there's a list, item number 1 will be purity of mind, which is the result of resolving emotional problems. Got it? Okay. Next one, number 2 on that list. Dhritya Atmanam niyamya. Niyamya means controlling. Controlling what? Atmanam. You can't control Atma, so Atma must mean something else here. Atma simply means oneself here. It's called a reflexive pronoun in this usage. So controlling oneself, dhritya, with some commitment. With commitment, controlling yourself. And this is very much related to the prior item, because someone who is full of emotional problems, you've seen sometimes these emotional problems spill out into their day-to-day lives. A good example of this is a child who naturally lacks emotional growth. It takes time, and being a teenager doesn't help. It even makes it more complicated to gain that emotional growth. Hopefully, by the time we're in our early 20s, we get some measure of emotional growth. I didn't. I'm being very honest. It took me a lot longer. It takes whatever time it takes, but in my early 20s, I was certainly not emotionally mature. So children, by definition, are not emotionally mature, and as a result, they act out. They shout and scream and have temper tantrums, etc. Well, you all know of some adults who have the equivalent of temper tantrums, and they act in childish ways. They act in childish ways not because they're children, they act in childish ways because of the emotional problems we just got done discussing. So when these emotional problems are reasonably addressed, and I added that word because there's no such thing as a person who is perfectly free of emotional problems. It would be kind of silly. Here's a metaphor, similar to a metaphor I've used before. If you go to a gym and work out 7 days a week for 8 hours, how long will it take to have a perfect body? You get the point. You don't get a perfect body. The bodies can't be perfected. Well, if you see a psychotherapist once a week for a decade, will you have a perfect mind? 2 decades, 3 decades. You get the point. No amount of physical exercise will give you a perfect body. No amount of therapy or emotional processing will give you a perfect mind. We need a reasonably healthy body. We need a reasonably healthy mind. One who has a reasonably healthy mind, niyamya, can easily control their behavior so they don't act out like children. Next, number 3, shabdadin vishayan tyaktva. Tyaktva, giving up, vishayan, objects. Shabdadin, a little technical expression, objects like sound. It's a reference to the ancient concept of there being 5 elements. Everything that exists is composed of these 5 elements, and beginning with space. And sound is, I'm going to bore you with this detail, sound is the particular object associated with the first of the 5 elements, space. I'm not going to dwell on this. It's an ancient way of saying material. So, Vishayan, objects, which are shabdadin, material objects, tyaktva, giving up material objects. Now, we have to understand everything Sri Krishna says in context. He's talked about this kind of giving up. We've started talking about this way back in chapter 2, and then very elaborately in chapters 3, 4, and 5. In chapter 5, we talked about 4 different ways of giving up. 4 different kinds of renunciation. We're not going to go back to all of that, but we need to understand when Sri Krishna says, giving up all material objects. Does it mean you should give up your car? Give up your computer? Give up your home? Obviously, that's not what he means. He is actually referring to karma yoga here. If you remember, one of the many kinds, many meaning 4 or 5 kinds, one of the manners of renunciation that Sri Krishna has described in earlier chapters is a renunciation involved in karma yoga, a kind of renunciation that is fundamental to karma yoga that I've actually mentioned in the last several classes. Can you remember what we've discussed here? What is the kind of renunciation that is fundamental to karma yoga? If you remember, good. And if you don't remember, it's okay. I'll help. That's why I'm here. Okay. And that's also why we have class after class after class. It takes time for these teachings to go on. Oh, here's an interesting observation. Decades ago, I told a fellow student, says, I told him, you know, Brahma Jnanam is easy. Karma yoga is complicated. I said that. Because from my perspective, then and now, understanding Brahman, at least at a conceptual level, is easy. The reality because of which everything exists. That's it. But understanding karma yoga is a whole lot more involved. So if you find yourself a little bit unclear about certain things, it's normal. This is a very subtle topic and very misunderstood topic. So let's go back to my leading question. What is the kind of renunciation that is fundamental to karma yoga? The fundamental renunciation required is this: to recognize the impossibility, some of you are remembering now, to recognize the impossibility of gaining perfect peace and contentment through worldly efforts. That's kind of renunciation. It's a renunciation of attitude. When you get it, that my worldly efforts will never culminate in perfect peace and contentment. That recognition is a kind of renunciation, right? Or I should say, as a result of that recognition, you have a certain kind of renunciation, and that is, you're no longer compelled to gain worldly accomplishments for the sake of perfect peace and contentment, because you finally understood that perfect peace and contentment can only be found on a spiritual path, not on a worldly path. This understanding, I've called it a transformation of attitude. It's like a shift of your worldview. Some authors like to use fancy words, paradigm shift. This paradigm shift means previously you thought all you have to do is apply yourself hard enough in life. One day you can have perfect peace and contentment. But after this recognition, you give up any, these words are important, you give up the false hope of gaining perfect peace and contentment through worldly efforts. That's it. And that's where the renunciation comes in. You give up the false hope of gaining perfect peace and contentment through worldly efforts. That's what Sri Krishna means here. Tyaktva, giving up. Shabdadin vishayan, giving up worldly objects. That's literally what he means, giving up worldly objects. But what does it mean in context? It means, as I just said, giving up that false hope of gaining perfect peace and contentment through worldly efforts. And the flip side of that is you are now focused on gaining perfect peace and contentment through spiritual practice. That's it. That's the transformation. And it's a radical transformation in which originally your efforts were focused out there in the world. After this paradigm shift, so to speak, your efforts are focused in here. This is where spiritual growth takes place. So this is a 180-degree shift in your orientation towards life. That's what Sri Krishna means. Giving up worldly objects means giving up that false hope and focusing instead on spiritual growth. And in this way, raga dvesha vyudasya. Vyudasya cha, and also vyudasya, getting rid of raga and dvesha. One of our favorite topics here. Remember our definition is very crucial. Ragas and dveshas are not likes and dislikes, as you've seen translated so many times. Raga is a compulsion to chase after what you want. Dvesha is a compulsion to run away from what you don't want. And when Sri Krishna says, giving up these raga and dveshas, how? And the answer is, he just told you. He just told you. If you say, Swamiji, how can I give up raga dvesha? Sri Krishna just told you. When you understand that your worldly efforts will never give you perfect peace and contentment, what happens to that compulsivity? You see the point? I'll say that again. This is crucial. You cannot give up raga dvesha through willpower. Suppose someone really likes tea, and they decide one day, I shouldn't drink tea, it's not spiritual. I have no idea why. Some people say drinking tea is not spiritual. I don't get that at all. Anyway, some people have that funny concept. So the person decides, I'm going to give up tea so I can be more spiritual. So next morning, no chai. Next afternoon, no chai. Next evening, no chai. What are they thinking about all day long? Chai. The point is, there's a raga for the tea, and merely restraining yourself from drinking tea is not going to make that raga go away. What would make that raga go away? How about if you get it, that even if I drink, I'm going to play with this just a little bit. Even if I drink tea, the happiness it gives lasts so short. Not only that, but sometimes the tea doesn't even make you happy. Some people are very fussy about how that tea should be made. It's got the wrong leaves, or it's too much milk, too little chini, whatever, all of this. So even that tea won't give you happiness. And if you're lucky and you get the exact kind of tea you like, how long do you enjoy it? It's gone in a couple of minutes. This is how you get rid of raga and dvesha. And that's what Sri Krishna said in the prior quarter. He said, by understanding, and I'll paraphrase now, make it a little simpler, by understanding the limitations of the happiness you can get in the world, including the happiness in a cup of tea. That's it. This is spiritual maturity. Spiritual path begins here. Begins where? Of course, the purity of mind is a precondition, but then, in order to proceed on imagine a path diverging. In fact, not diverging a little bit. You come to an intersection, it's a T intersection. You can turn left, you can turn right. Well, when I say that, I have to share this observation. If you go to my guru's ashram in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, you go down you get off the freeway, you drive off this road, and then you have a choice. You can turn left into the biggest flea market in eastern Pennsylvania, or you can turn right into Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, where Brahma Vidya is taught. The vast majority of people turn left. Only a few make that right turn. Well, that is the transformation of worldly thinking. I said before, 180-degree shift. And that metaphor very nicely describes it, and that is where you make that crucial turn onto the spiritual path. Then, Vivikta Sevi Lagvashi, Vivikta Sevi Lagvashi, Yatavakaya Manasaha, Yatavakaya Manasaha, Dhyana Yoga Paro Nityam, Dhyana Yoga Paro Nityam, Vairagyam Samupashritaha, Vairagyam Samupashritaha. Further prerequisites for gaining enlightenment. Vivikta Sevi, one who lives. Vivikta means separately. And it can mean one who lives, if you're very literal translation, one who lives in isolation. Well, not a single person in this room lives in isolation, and that's not what he means here. But there's an important message here. Let's try to get to what is Sri Krishna intending by these words. He's obviously not telling Arjuna to go live in a cave, right? Put it in context. He's not telling Arjuna or any of us to go live in a cave. Well, then what does it mean, Vivikta Sevi, which literally means to resort to a life of isolation? How can we understand that? And here's the point. If you live surrounded by family members and friends and colleagues and all of that, to be vivikta means separate. And separate here, in fact, I remember my guru talking about this in a very humorous way. I don't think I can get his humor. But he said that your family members are there, friends there, colleagues there. They're outside of you. The problem comes when they get inside of you. When the problems you're having with family members, friends, and colleagues, when all of that gets inside your head, it's like they're all living there and arguing with you inside when they get, nice American expression, when they get under your skin. That's it. Vivekta sevi here means not to let them get under your skin. Means to have some inner space, inner distance. Not to be so entirely emotionally entangled with all those people. That emotional entanglement, when your whole life becomes, sorry to put it like this, when your life becomes like one of these sappy Bollywood movies. With all of this emotional mess. That emotional mess needs to be resolved. You need to have some inner space, some inner freedom, a healthy emotional distance. Healthy emotional distance. Doesn't mean you don't love. You continue to love, you continue to care, you continue the sense of warmth and intimacy, but there's a sense of healthy emotional distance. That's what that word Vivekta Sevi refers to. Laghu Ashi, one who eats lightly. Even Sri Krishna is giving us diet advice. The point is, you need a healthy lifestyle. It's just obvious. Every book on yoga will talk about the importance of diet. In fact, back in, chapter 14 or 17, we had this discussion about 17, what kinds of food you should eat. You should eat sattvika food and avoid rajasa and tamasa food. It's not for the sake of diet, it's for the sake of health. And if your body is not healthy, your mind will be affected. So, lagwashi, have a healthy lifestyle. Yata vak, by the way, there's a typo here. Yata vak, there should be a second ka. Yata vak kaya. Manasaha. One whose vak, speech, kaya, body, and manasa, mind, are yata, controlled. Now, he's already said niyamya, having controlled oneself. So here we can take it a little differently. Having controlled your body, mind, and voice. Body is kind of the obvious one. To control what you say and control what goes on in your mind, what would it take? How many times have you said something accidentally and then regretted it? Happens a lot, right? Why didn't you control it? You know better. In fact, you knew better at that time, but you didn't manage to prevent those words from escaping from your mouth, and you suffered the consequences. Maybe the person you were talking to also suffered the consequences. This happens all the time, and it happens because of inattention. Many people live their lives mechanically. And it's simply action-reaction. You act and you react. You do something, somebody else does something, you react to them, somebody else does something else, you react to them. So life becomes action and reaction, which is very mechanical. If you live a mechanical life like that, can you restrain those unfortunate words from coming out of your mouth? You need to be attentive. A nice interpretation of this line is, as a crucial prerequisite for gaining enlightenment, is to be attentive. to be self-aware is a term that's often used. Self-observant is a term that I've used. You might remember maybe a month or two ago, I said the most powerful transformative practice. Remember this? I said the most powerful transformative spiritual practice is non-judgmental self-observation. Non-judgmental self-observation. Self-observation means to observe what you do. And of course, when you observe, then you say, why did I do that? Why am I doing what I do? To constantly ask yourself that question, why am I doing what I do? But to do that self-observation in a non-judgmental way. Too often we criticize ourselves, we put ourselves down. That's all harmful. So I would interpret this line as not merely controlling your body, mind, and speech, but to be self-aware, to be self-observant, because that the only way you can control what you say and do is if you are self-observant. It's crucial. Then, next, we're going through our list of prerequisites. Dhyana yoga paraha. One should be paraha, fixed on dhyana yoga, the practice of meditation. You should be a meditator. And Sri Krishna makes it very clear, nityaha, constantly, always, meaning every day. How many times have I told you in our meditation session? Daily meditation is a must. Just like you bathe every day, you brush your teeth every day, you have to meditate every day. It's not a big deal. You don't complain, oh, I have to bathe every day. Oh. No one complains about it. It's not and it's not unpleasant, is it? A shower is not unpleasant, not painful, unless you bathe in cold water, I suppose. But if you have nice warm water, it's pleasant. Same for meditation. It's pleasant. So what is the excuse not to meditate every day? You get the point. Finally, vairagya samupashrataha. Samupashrataha, being established in a condition of vairagyam, detachment. And that goes back to what we discussed in the prior verse, to be established in detachment towards worldly activities, and to quote myself, you have detachment towards worldly activities with the recognition that all of your worldly efforts will never, ever lead to perfect peace and contentment. Please note that this vairagya, this detachment, is born of this particular recognition. Recognition of the limitations of what you can gain through worldly activities. That knowledge leads to this vairagya, this detachment. Okay, this topic ends with the next verse, which is very simple, so we'll just go through it and then finish our class. Ahankaram balam, oh, got the wrong verse here. Ahankaram balam darpam, ahankaram balam darpam, kamam krodham parigraham, kamam krodham vingraham, vimuchya nirmama shanto, vimuchya nirmama shanto, brahma bhuyaya kalpate, brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So, what else is on this to-do list for becoming fully prepared for enlightenment? Beginning of the third line, vimuchya, becoming free. Becoming free from what? Now here's another shopping list. Becoming free from, first line, ahankara, ego. becoming free from balam, aggressiveness, becoming free from darpam, pride, arrogance, becoming free from kama, desire, krodha, anger, parigraha, grasping, acquisitiveness, vimuchya, give it up. How? He's already told you. The prior statements, he's already told you. When that paradigm shift takes place, when you recognize the limitations of what you can accomplish through worldly efforts, that recognition is a spiritual transformation. It changes the path of your life, and what you'll find is with your ongoing spiritual practice, all of this junk, what do you mean by junk? Ahankara, balam, darpam, kamam, krodam, etc. All of that junk, or the American expression baggage, all of that emotional baggage, vimuchya, you don't even have to give it up. It just goes away. Honestly, it goes away. I'm evidence that it goes away, because if you met me at the age of 22, what you would have seen is ahankaram, balam, darpam, kamam. I was an embodiment of all of that as a young man. It just goes with your ongoing, after this transformation, and with your ongoing spiritual practice. Then what? Then you become nirmamaha, free from possessiveness. Free from possessiveness because you know what you possess won't make you perfectly happy and content, right? In fact, you could argue that the more you have, the more you have to take care of. Isn't it true? You get a bigger house, you get more maintenance problems. You get a fancier car, you get more things that can break down. So this kind of wisdom leads to a kind of simplicity, inner simplicity, here represented by this word, nirmamaha, free from possessiveness, and you also become shantaha, peaceful. This transformation of attitude, you don't have to try to become peaceful. The agitation just goes away. And in this way, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. Kalpate. This person who has gained all these prerequisites as described in the prior 3 verses, that person kalpate is fit, is able, is fit for what? Brahma Bhuyaya. And it's a tricky word. That literally it means that person is fit for becoming Brahman. That's the literal translation. By the way, any literal translation is defective because words always gain their meaning in context. So what then is a contextual meaning? It can't mean you become Brahman. We've already had this discussion here today. Your true nature is already divine. You don't become divine. Your true nature is already non-different from Brahman. You don't become that. So it is truly a matter of self-recognition. Sri Krishna said before that this is the paranishta, the highest kind of jnanam, knowledge. The highest kind of spiritual wisdom is the wisdom in which you recognize that your true nature has always been divine. When you remove that so-called veil of ignorance, what remains is you in your true divine nature. And here Sri Krishna says, you, as a result of the preparedness described in these past 3 verses, you are ready for that discovery. And when you're fully ready for the discovery, it doesn't take effort. It happens very easily, very naturally. You make that discovery. Okay. Maybe I'll come back to that last line in the next class, but it's a good place to conclude today. Short announcement. We're shifting our schedule a little bit for summer months, as we used to do before the pandemic. So our Vedanta class on Sunday is on hiatus, a summer break. There'll be no Vedanta class. And the satsang is being shifted from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the reason for that is I love to sit outside in the picnic area for satsang. You will love it too. If you haven't done it before, please come. You'll be pleasantly surprised. We put out some chairs in back, and on a beautiful summer evening to sit out there and hear the birds chirping and to have our satsang out there. It's delightful. So please come and join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. Of course, if it rains, we'll come inside, but I think the rain will come much later, so I think we'll be okay. So please join us for satsang tomorrow, and we'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Uttabasvira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gurudhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.